we've got Kansas State taking up the rear, Mason. They drop another game. That's their third loss of the season. If it wasn't for so many teams having so many losses at this point, I would have dropped Kansas State out of the top 25, to be honest with you. They're so inconsistent. Certainly, there's been weeks this year that Kansas State has performed like a top 25 team, but there has been several, and I can think of even maybe one or two that they won that they did not look like a top 25 team in. So Kansas State kind of taking a back seat at this point, right? They don't control their own destiny at this point. Memphis, this is a team that's kind of just hung around that 25 to 45, pretty much throughout the season, right? And not a bad football team. We're not going to go into Memphis. We ain't got no Memphis Tiger fans watching this anyhow. Syracuse gets another win. Very, very impressive season there for Fran Brown and company. Kyle McCord over there playing for the Orange. They've really exceeded expectations of anybody that was going to take over Syracuse in their first year and go, with three, or I guess it's possible they could still take a loss or whatnot, but 3 losses so far this season. Get another win this weekend. Good stuff. Tulane has clinched their spot in the AAC title game against Army. So we're going to see a big game against Army this weekend. But, and an Army is obviously competing with Boise State for that spot, that one at-large spot there for a non-Power 4 conference champion. So Tulane is really got a chance to kind of affect a lot of other things that are going on in college football this weekend. So that or in conference championship weekend, and Army's kind of got to get over that obstacle of Notre Dame first. So kind of got an interesting little triangle going on there between those 3 teams. Iowa State at 21. Iowa State, they got another win this weekend, but really kind of stubbed their toe a couple weeks in a row there. Arizona State, big win this past weekend. Really, really big win over Kansas State. Arizona State this week is going to be hosting BYU. We're going to talk about that game on Tuesday, guys. So I hope that you guys will come and join us on Tuesday as we break that game down. Mason and I did not give Arizona State the respect that they deserved last week, or I didn't. Maybe Mason did. I don't want to speak for him. I can't really remember, but I was on the Kansas State train last week. I haven't even bet on Kansas State a whole lot this year, and I picked a really bad week to do it as Arizona State showed up and showed out, had a shutout going right there until the last quarter or so of that game. We talked about Army and everything they've got going on. That, again, is going to be a game that we talk about on Tuesday, 7:30 Eastern on the live show. That's whenever we do all of our big breakdowns here on the First and Long College Football Show. So that's going to be one of the games that we do break down. But Army will be on the road at Touchdown Jesus. That's going to be a really, really, really big game there with some serious ramifications for the college football playoff. And just a story that a lot of people have followed and enjoyed this year. If you've watched Army at all, and if you're an American, right? Kind of just an interesting story. I was thinking today, Mason, with that matchup with Notre Dame, it'd be hard as a Notre Dame team to get all fired up to try to go beat Army, right? But you better be ready, because Army has got this ain't your grandpa's Army football team, and maybe that's a bad example. Maybe they were good with our grandpa. Anyway, I digress. 18 Clemson. Look, I don't really have all that much faith in Clemson. We kind of talked about them today in our reaction show, Mason, and I tend to agree with you that this version of Clemson looks more of like what we saw last year rather than what we saw during Deshaun Watson and, NFL, insert Clemson NFL quarterback and wide receiver combo here, right? It doesn't seem like that type of team right now, although they got a good win against what I think is a good Pitt team. We've had Pitt ranked in our top 5 a bunch this year. Really had no choice with the way that they kind of dominated their schedule. But Clemson doesn't seem like a true contender to me. Let's just, that it is what it is. We got them at the 18 spot. South Carolina is going to square off with them. South Carolina is who we got at 17. They're obviously going to square off at the end of the season. I love South Carolina in that matchup. I can't wait to see the spread and everything on that, and get to talk about that game the last week of the season. BYU at 16, they predicted we predicted that they would drop a game this week to Kansas. They did do that at BYU, but BYU, that was their first loss of the season, so they honestly had some grace, right? And they take a conference loss there. So now their back's kind of against the wall, right? Because you're going to be going on the road to Arizona State again. I think I may have already said it. Going to talk about that game on Tuesday, 7:30 Eastern. We hope that you guys will come and join us. Colorado 15. Colorado's a surging football team, man, and it's unconventional, right? We kind of talked about this during the betting show on Thursday, Mason. They're using an extension of the pass as their run game, essentially throwing the ball behind the line of scrimmage, real short dink and dunk throws, and then going vertical with the big plays. And it's really working. I mean, it's really working. They've got a pretty good little game plan there. We'll see how it works as the competition and the games and the magnitude of the games continue to increase for Colorado. They've exceeded all expectations, exceeded my expectations this season already, and the Fighting Primes are not done. Tennessee drops the 14 after dropping the game to Georgia. I think we kind of all saw maybe the bugaboo, I guess, for Tennessee at this point, not able to hit the big plays, right? Not able to hit enough big plays. The defense held them in there, I think, long enough in the game for the offense to be able to put some points on the board. The offense just wasn't able to do it. Going against a really good defense in Georgia, and then I think we saw a more realistic test of the secondary of Tennessee this weekend, Mason. We had not seen a team that could really pass the ball go against Tennessee, and we hadn't got a chance to see it. And we did this weekend, and Georgia just so happened to be on their game as well, and really kind of cooked that secondary of Tennessee several times throughout the game and was able to hit multiple big plays. So now we've got a little bit more of a sample size on this Tennessee secondary, and I think, with the numbers coming back to reality, that makes sense. Texas A&M at 13 played nobody this week, just kind of the benefactor of other people ahead of them going down. We've got Boise State at 12. Just kind of got Boise State hanging around this 10 to 12, area. Some people, say, well, there's 2-loss team here ahead of them or a Texas ahead of them. Look, I think we all realize at this point that you're going to get credit for playing in the SEC versus the Mountain West. I mean, it is what it is. And Boise State, I'm not saying they don't have any good wins, but they don't have any great wins, right? They've got some good ones. And I think that's, why they're considered in playoff contention and going to the playoffs as Boise State, as a Boise State team. I think that's a huge, huge accomplishment. And to be able to do that with a loss on their record, it's not like Boise State's undefeated. I mean, they have lost a game. So, whether it be to number one or not, they have lost a football game, and that's a good loss. But there's no, like, great wins at this point. And the schedule in the Mountain West is just never going to be the same as what it is in the SEC. The fact of the reality is Boise State needs to be in the Big 12, I think. I really Boise State should have been part of the Pac-12, and then they would have already been a part of the Big 12 with all the movement that went on last year. But that didn't happen. Shoulda, coulda, woulda. I like Boise State. I think they're a decent football team, well-rounded. Got cooked through the air this past weekend. Absolutely got cooked. There, especially in the beginning of that game, were able to put up points and get a lot of turnovers and kind of cover that up and get the win this weekend. And that's what good teams do. Whenever they meet some adversity, they figure out a way to get around it. And Boise State's one of those teams that can beat you multiple ways. So I think that is impressive. Number 11, we got Miami. We all know at this point Miami took the loss to Tech. I don't have much to add to that. We've got them kind of hovering around right there. Miami's going to have a chance to jump right back up because more than likely they're going to go to the ACC championship game, I think. But there's a tiebreaker situation in the ACC that I'll admit to you, I don't fully understand. I need to look up the ACC tiebreaker. Apparently, Clemson is somehow ahead of Miami. Is that right? Somebody was commenting about that earlier on our earlier video, and maybe you guys can let me know in the comment section. Brush me up on what the tiebreaker is there.
I think it's because Miami hasn't played as many conference games. So Clemson, I think all of their conference games are done. They're
Yeah,
seven
okay,
and one.
that makes sense.
Miami's 5-1 right now. So I
Yeah,
think until they get the rest of theirs played out, Clemson will be ahead.
and they don't play each other head to head, so there still will have to be a tiebreaker. Because Clemson, I mean, they're not going to lose another ACC game, right? Because they're done. And then Miami has got to play what? Florida State at the end of the year? No, that's Florida that plays Florida State at the end of the year. So anyway, there's a tiebreaker there in the ACC, and it looks like it's going to have to be utilized, in my opinion. Mason, what do you think about 25 through 11? Maybe I can look that up real quick.
Yeah, so Miami's got to play Wake Forest this week, and then they got to go to Syracuse, which could be a really interesting game.
Oh, that could be a lot of
Um,
points there.
yeah, yeah. So if you thought Georgia Tech was tough, and you had to go to Atlanta to face Georgia Tech, I think that Syracuse is a bit of a different animal, and you got to go all the way to Syracuse in late November. Uh, Yikes! That sounds scary for a South Florida team to go to Syracuse in late November. Could be a little bit of a shock to the system there
I think
for
they
the
got the dome,
Hurricanes.
don't they? They got the dome. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah, because it used to be called the Carrier Dome. Funny story. They called it the
Oh yeah,
Carrier
that's
Dome,
right.
which, if you
That's right.
guys don't know, here's an advertisement for Carrier, free advertisement. You could sponsor the show. It's an AC company, right? They make air
Yeah.
conditioning units, and they had a game there a couple Septembers ago. As a Southern gentleman, I didn't realize how hot it actually got in New York in the summertime. Apparently, it gets very, very hot. Um, the AC didn't work, ironically, right? So the Carrier buildings, uh, Carrier AC units did not work, and it was like 90 something degrees in the building inside with no breeze, right, for the game. And that was a couple of years ago, and I was just like, oh my gosh, how ironic is that? But yeah, sorry about that. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. So anyways, yeah, Miami tough game potentially at the end of the year. Let's wait and see how the ACC works out. If Clemson, since they're at 18 here, if they aren't able to get into the ACC championship game, they're out of the college football playoff. Um, Miami, I guess
Oh
much
yeah,
the same because if they're not in, then they're behind Clemson. The ACC, look, they shouldn't get two teams in. I'll be honest with you. Like SMU, if they were to win out and lose the ACC championship game, I don't think they should be in. They don't have a ton of impressive wins, and you can say the same thing about a lot of the Big Ten teams. There's not a lot of big wins. Um, we'll get into them once we get into our Big Ten a little bit more, but or our top 10 a little bit more of those Big Ten teams. But yeah, outside of that, for this list, there's not a whole lot changing. South Carolina, I thought it was a good win against Missouri, but that was a team that you were a 14-point favorite to, and you won by 4 points. So, how impressive really was it? The offense kind of stalled in the second half there. Defense gave up a ton of points in the fourth quarter. It started to. I thought that the Chiefs was just going to straight up slide off that cracker there at the end of the game, but credit them to be able to come back and win that football game for the home crowd. Colorado, they're looking to me like the Big 12 favorites at this point. BYU going down, obviously. I just think I'm more impressed with Colorado's win over Utah because I said that this was a game that Utah could end up winning. Now, looking back on it with the injuries, they flip flop from quarterbacks. Isaac Wilson gets a start. They had an emotional potential win the week before against BYU. Utah, I'm talking about, obviously. I think they were just a little bit too drained to actually get up and play in that football game.
And Wilson threw 3 interceptions too, man. I mean, that offense, if you give away 3 chances, that offense ain't good enough to rebound from that. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and what you're banking on, if Utah were to win that football game or have any sort of upset, what you're banking on is the potential of Isaac Wilson, which I think is there, but he's not there yet. He needs another offseason, maybe another full season even. But as a true freshman, I like his skill set. I do think that he is a lot like his brother. He's a lot like Zach Wilson. I think that he's going to be a great college quarterback. But I think he really stands to benefit from another season. Anyways, we're talking about Utah here, and they're not even the top 25. So let's get back on track. Yeah, not a whole lot has changed. Tulane, welcome. Memphis, welcome back. Kansas State just hanging on by a thread. My pick to win the Big 12, and they're just, man, they're playing bad. I think Avery Johnson's a little bit banged up. Not just that offense is just not good.
He doesn't. He's not anticipating throws yet, man. And that's I saw it. He threw one to Dante Cephas in that game, man, where it was like, I'm not kidding. It was kind of like, going and playing touch football or something with your buddies. Like Dante Cephas was open for 2 seconds before the ball left. What's his name's hands?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the recipe for throwing interceptions at this level of football. Now, nobody was able to capitalize on it in that instance, but I mean, that's why you see the inconsistencies with this guy. I mean, he's just not there yet, man.
Yeah, he's 1.5 reads and then he's tucking and running.
Mm-hmm.
Like he doesn't have it quite yet. I thought that he would be a little bit more developed at this point. He's not there yet. The offense as a whole is just pretty bad outside of DJ Giddens, which what a waste of a talent. Like, once again, Kansas State has an amazing running back and nothing else on offense and a great defense. Like, I really like their defense too. I think everything was there for them to win the Big 12, except quarterback's not ready yet and no true threats on the outside. Even
imagine
Dante
if they had
Cephas.
Will Howard.
Oh yeah. I wonder. Dang, could you imagine if they would have got him out of the transfer portal? My gosh. What are they thinking? What are these teams thinking? Why? Let's pay more money for the young guy who's inexperienced and has no wins and see what we can get. This isn't the NFL. You don't have unlimited funds, and people get tired of paying for shitty football.
Just people are running off experienced quarterbacks to not let the young guy run off. And it's like, where was he going to go? I mean, I guess he could have went somewhere. I'm just, it's crazy. The tail wags the dog a lot in today's college football, and it's maddening at times.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's all I got with 10 through 25. We can keep it moving here.
Hey, I was going to say, we were talking about the tiebreaker in this ACC, so I'll just tell y'all real quick. So if there's a 2-way tie for first, the team with the highest win percentage outright or via tiebreaker, which we know that none of these teams play each other, so it would be highest win percentage between those two. Then that would be the team that went. Now, if you've got a 2-way tie between SMU and Miami, right, which I guess technically right now you don't because Miami has a ACC loss, so I won't get into that. But it would be overall conference win percentage if it came down to that. So Clemson, where it shows them in first place right now, they're not actually in first place because of the win percentage situation.
Mm-hmm.
They would automatically lose the tiebreaker, even though they haven't beat any of those teams head-to-head. So just FYI, so that we're all that much smarter tomorrow whenever we go to work and we're talking about this. That's kind of how that tiebreaker would work there in the ACC. All right, let's keep going with our top 25. Number 10, we've got Notre Dame. Look, Notre Dame has just really continued to just do what they do. And was it an amazing performance by Notre Dame this past weekend? Considering the fact they were spotted 5 turnovers in that football game, I don't think it was that great. But I do like the fact that we're seeing more balance from Notre Dame at this point. A couple hundred yards through the air, a couple hundred yards on the ground. This team is really good at running the football. And the defense is there is not another defense in college football that's top 10 in every single category. So this is the only one in all of college football that's top 10 in every single category. So is it the best defense in the nation? It might be. And nobody's talking about it. So that's something to consider, guys. I mean, this seems to be the year of the defense to me. I'm just looking at these teams. I mean, Ole Miss has got some firepower. Miami's got some serious firepower. Oregon, you could say, but I mean, there's been multiple times this year that Oregon's offense wasn't able to carry them. I don't know. And if you're sitting here comparing defenses, Notre Dame might be one of the better ones. I think they're definitely top 5 in the country. SMU at number 9, they're one of those teams that's powerful on offense and really good against the run, give up a lot against the pass, and I'm concerned, going into the ACC championship game or something like that with Miami. That game may end up being, 52 to 45 or something, man. I mean, seriously, that one is just going to be absolutely nuts, I think. Ole Miss at number 8. Ole Miss is an interesting team, aren't they? I thought about Ole Miss a lot today as I was doing this top 25 and, just kind of looking at their situation and the way they handled South Carolina, which at the time we thought wasn't even that great of a win, right? We didn't even think that was that great of a win at the time. And Ole Miss just made really pretty easy work of South Carolina, right? 27-3, I think was the final in that one. That was a good win. We didn't realize it at the time, but that was a good win. Beat Georgia. That's a good win, right? Lose to Kentucky. That's a bad loss. But at the time, I don't think Kentucky had quit yet either. So, and that was a loss at home. So really, it's inexcusable no matter what. And then Ole Miss. Who else did they lose to, Mason? I lost to LSU. I lost to LSU at LSU, and at that time, LSU was humming along, right? So I would say one bad loss, one mediocre loss, one really good win, and one good win has got Ole Miss in the top 10 here in the top in 2024, and got a head-to-head win over Georgia, so that puts them in a decent spot for the SEC championship. And they're going to need some other things to happen, obviously. I won't say a good position, but they are in somewhat of a position. Going to need some help. I think Ole Miss is a really good football team, y'all. I do, and I think it's going to take a really good game plan to take care of this team, and especially if they get Trey Harris back nice and healthy, that offense is just going to be that much tougher to deal with. They can scheme it up offensively. Y'all know what it is with Lane Kiffin. I mean, I don't have to explain myself on that. He's one of the top 5 offensive coaches in the nation. I mean, cry about it. I don't love the guy, but he knows how to run that side of the ball, and it seems like they kind of got something going defensively, because if you look at their point totals for this year, they haven't gave up crap to nobody. I mean, they really haven't. They've done a great job limiting teams offensively. So even in their loss to Kentucky, you know what I'm saying? Kentucky had like 20 points. So Ole Miss is one of those teams. They've been inconsistent at times, but man, when they've been on, they've been on. 7, Penn State. I hate Penn State even being up here, Mason. I'll just be honest with you. And y'all can cuss at me in the thing and tell me that I don't like the Big Ten or whatever. Type. I don't give a shit. Penn State is not one of the top 10 teams in the country. They're not. And we're going to all find out together. We're going to see it in the playoff, because from what I see, this college football playoff committee, I'm with Kirby Smart. I don't know what they look for. Is it good losses? Is it good wins? I don't know. In this situation, it seems like the what's the old saying? The beauty is in the hole of the behinder, right? Is that what it is? I don't know. I don't know if that applies here. Maybe I said that wrong, but you get me, man. I just don't like this Nittany Lions team. I don't think they're that good. I think that they're been extremely creative. I think they've been extremely resourceful. with the guys that they've got on their team, and kudos to the coaching staff, but offensively, this team is hamstrung, and they're not going to do anything in the playoffs when they get there. I'm just not against the defenses that we see on this slide. They're not. I mean, they're not going to do nothing to SMU either. I mean, even SMU, who can't defend the pass, doesn't matter. Penn State can't pass it. So I think that's one of my least favorite teams in the top 10, just to be honest with y'all. No good wins at all. A win over Illinois, that's the only good win they've got. A loss in which they didn't score an offensive touchdown. I don't know. Just lackluster to me. Georgia at 6, extremely inconsistent team, extremely volatile team. Don't know what you're getting week to week. Go out on the road to Ole Miss and absolutely crap on a paper play in the middle of the field in front of 65,000 or whatever that stadium holds. And then turn around and do what they did this past weekend and play really, really good offensive football, protect the quarterback, and all the stuff they couldn't do the week before, right? And then we've seen the defense perform at the highest of highs and pretty consistent on defense. The offense has been what's inconsistent. But we've seen the Georgia defense play really well, and we've seen them play just pretty good. And so we've seen the ceiling and I think probably the floor for that defense as well. But Georgia's a bit of an enigma. 2 really good wins, multiple top 25 wins, multiple top 10 losses. Georgia had their back against the wall. They said playoffs started last week. Well, they're 1-0 so far, Mason. What do you think about 6 through 10?
Yeah, well, starting where you left off with Georgia, look, they've played the toughest schedule in the conference or in college football. That should matter, first of all. You've lost 2 of those games. Your 4 big ones are done. They're gone. They're over with. You had 2 back-to-back, really, right there with Ole Miss and then Tennessee. So really impressive for Georgia to be able to bounce back and win like they did against Tennessee. I've got no problem putting them at 6. You could put Ole Miss ahead of Georgia because they have the head-to-head and looked really good in that game. But you have to look at the entire schedule as well. And they lost to Kentucky, a Kentucky team that nobody's even watched in the past month. They've been on the side of a freaking milk carton. So, like, I get putting Georgia ahead of Kentucky as well. You look at what Georgia has done with their schedule, and then versus Ole Miss, who also lost to LSU, who just got throttled by Florida. I mean, the losses are inexcusable for Ole Miss. They're not inexcusable for Georgia. So for the entirety of that schedule, I think that Georgia has a better resume, even though they don't have the head-to-head. How you value that is up to your opinion.
Let me comment on that for just real quick. Mason P. I'm not going to say your last name on the show here. Thanks for watching and commenting. He says Ole Miss should be ahead of Georgia. They literally just dominated them. Okay, I got you. Should NIU be ahead of Notre Dame? Because they dominated them. Should we have NIU at number 9? I mean, I get what you're saying, and you can completely argue that point. I'm not trying to be an ass or something, but I'm just saying, Ole Miss has a really bad loss to like a 3 or 4 win team this year, right? So how do we weight that? I mean, talk about inconsistent. I mean, we've seen some inconsistency out of Ole Miss, and they lost a game to an LSU team that, you can say, well, it was nighttime at LSU. It was nighttime at LSU when Alabama went in there and dominated their ass. So Ole Miss has 2 pretty bad losses.
Yeah.
To teams that are not in contention, no longer ranked, right? Neither one of them are ranked. So, yeah, Ole Miss has a really good win. Right? They have 1 really good win. Georgia has 2 really good wins.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of my argument there, Mason P. I appreciate you watching, man. Thanks for coming out. Go ahead, Mason.
Yeah, but I will say, and you kind of answered this when you were talking about Ole Miss, I do think they should be ahead of Penn State because they do have actual big wins. I know Penn State only has 1 loss, but
you're right.
I mean, and you even said it. I don't, you don't even want them in the top 10. I completely agree with you. What I want is to see Penn State play an Oregon. I know that they played Ohio State and lost, but I want to see them with a loaded schedule. And this is just the trend in the Big Ten right now. The Big Ten is down, y'all. The Big Ten is awful as a entire conference. They're terrible. They got Oregon and Ohio State, and all of a sudden, we're propping Indiana up, who has completely dominated the schedule that they've been given, but haven't played anybody. They haven't played a Penn State, an Oregon, or Ohio State. Y'all, there are 3 good teams in the Big Ten, and there's out of 18, and that's it. And we're propping these teams up, thinking that they should get as many teams into the college football playoff as the SEC. I think it's just absolutely ridiculous. We talked about Ole Miss. SMU has a chance to win the ACC. I don't think they do it, if I'm honest with you, Mark. I think Miami and that offense find a way to get right. But at this point, we're 3 weeks away from an ACC championship game. SMU absolutely deserves to be ahead of any other team in the ACC with what they're doing. And then Notre Dame, another team that doesn't play anybody. They got a good win against Texas A&M. That is a good win early in the season with a brand new head coach that was trying to figure out his team. But Notre Dame's a really good defense. So I think if that game were to be played today, it might have a different outcome. It would be much more competitive, I think, for both offenses, really. But that'd be something to watch there. But I think Notre Dame, if they win out, they deserve to be in the playoff. I'm not really going to pick at them too much.
All right, 1 through 5, there it is, folks. The show that hates the Big Ten, we've got Big Ten 1, 2, and 3. Go figure, right? Oregon is the closest thing we've got to a dominant team this year. Was not a dominant performance this past week. Mason, we saw, and I had to go back and I had to watch some of it today because I was watching the game, but it was kind of secondary background. I had other stuff going on that I was paying attention to. Dan Lanning did his whole 4th down, I'm going for it thing again, and didn't get it, and could have took 3, could have got 3 points, and decided to, go for it one time, and then fake punt. There was a fake punt in the game. I guess he thought that they needed a spark against Wisconsin because things weren't going that great. But I don't know, man. Some of those decisions to me, and we saw Kirby Smart do it. We saw Kirby Smart do it whenever he first came to Georgia. It felt like he needed to pull a string every once in a while, and it almost never worked. Right? It almost never worked. Look, Oregon gets the win. No big deal. It didn't cost him anything. Everybody's entitled to have a bad game every once in a while, especially in this year's college football. And let's be real, Wisconsin hit on some big plays in that game, averaged over 13 yards per catch, right? Or 13 yards per attempt passing. So they were able to hit some explosives. And then there's, obviously some pieces still missing for Oregon, but I don't know, man. I just, that was a little bit of a tough performance. Dylan Gabriel runs into some issues whenever he gets into the red zone. We all know at this point, he doesn't have a rocket arm. He's not throwing the football 60 miles an hour or nothing. The windows get tight in the red zone. He does tend to try to still force him in there. He's got the most touchdowns of any quarterback ever. So I don't want to pick too much, but it has happened several times this year where he gets in the red zone, and that seems to be where he throws the most interceptions, in my opinion. Is Oregon the most dominant team? Yes. Do they deserve to be number 1? Yes, they do. And but I am ready to see them play another big game. It's been a bit of a disappointing run to the end of the schedule here, right? I mean, I'm not hating. It's just it sucks. I want to see big teams play other big teams, and that's not what we're getting out of the Big Ten right this second. We do have a big one this weekend, though. Ohio State and Indiana. That is a big one. It's going to be on at noon, unfortunately, which I guess it would be probably pretty doggone cold there in Ohio if they played the night game. But I digress. I'd love to see that one at night or 3:30. But it's at noon. It's the Fox Big Noon kickoff. We're going to talk about that game on Tuesday. Um, Ohio State, I definitely feel like is one of the top 5 teams in the country. I think you could pretty much place them anywhere on here, right? The game against Penn State is where they're getting all their credibility, and I told you how I feel about Penn State. I'm not a huge proponent of Penn State. I don't think they're nearly as good as some of the other teams here in the top 12. I think Penn State and I think Boise would have an upper hand over Penn State. I think just about anybody in our top 15 would have an upper hand there. So, and it's not like Ohio State just beat the stew out of them or anything. Beat them pretty good. Nothing negative to take away from that win on the road, but Ohio State has one decent win and one good loss. And that's kind of what they're hanging their hat on right now. They're going to have a chance to beat an undefeated Indiana team this weekend. It's going to be easier said than done. Can't wait to break down that game. Indiana, we have at 3. I swapped out Indiana and Texas, guys. And to be honest with you, I feel like I could probably drop Texas down maybe even a little bit more. Texas is also one of those teams where it's like they don't really have the good wins. I mean, I don't they don't seem to really have that great of wins this year. I mean, I just be honest with you. This weekend they had their chance to really put it on Arkansas, couldn't get it done offensively, right? A nice easy cruise to a 10-point win. I hate to complain, but I don't know. It was less than impressive in my opinion. Alabama, we talked about this before we got on the show, Mason. Alabama, it would appear that Alabama's got some momentum right now. And I think that they do. I think that there's definitely some truth to that. But Alabama has gotten at least 3 turnovers in their last 5 games. That's great. The defense is doing wonders. They're turning the ball over. That's a good thing, and I'm not complaining about that. But you're going to get into a situation eventually where somebody's not going to make 3 mistakes and hand you extra possessions and you know what I'm saying, ruin their own offensive possessions. I'm interested to see whenever that happens. And Jalen Milroe has kind of carried the rushing attack, at least last week he did. Gonna need somebody else to step up. You're not gonna go through and beat 3 top 10 teams to go win a national championship with just your running back running the football. It's going to need to be a team effort, and eventually you're going to have to just win on good hard-nosed football and scheme rather than getting turnovers. I don't know when that's going to be, but Alabama looks to be a shoe-in for the college football playoff, so I know that we're going to see it eventually, and they look to be a shoe-in for the SEC championship, and who they play, I think, is going to depend on Texas A&M there at the end of the season. Still got a couple of weeks of football. We'll see. But it looks like Alabama's got a good shot to get in there. What are your thoughts? The win, Alabama's win over Georgia really just kind of catapulted this team. And we talked about it early in the season. Both teams were undefeated at the time. Whoever could win that game was going to go a long way. Well, we had no idea that it was going to make or break making the SEC championship. But as usual, Georgia and Alabama, that game either decides the SEC championship or it decides who's going a lot of times. And this year was no exception, even without divisions and all that stuff. All right, what do you think? 1 through 5.
Yeah, so Alabama, they look to be going to the SEC championship game. They've got OU and Auburn left on their schedule. I think that they handle OU. I think Alabama is finally figuring out their offense, and I don't know what took them so long to realize that their best offense is with Jalen Milroe as a running back. Like, it doesn't – we could have told you that 2 years ago. But finally, they're getting things going with the offense. Jalen Milroe is the best running back in college football, period, and he happens to be a decent passer as well. And look, I'm kind of joking about his arm. I think when he does make the throws, it looks beautiful. I think that he really has a lot of potential as a pro, and this season he can make the throws, but he's not perfect. And Alabama hasn't had very good pass protection. I think that's been a real issue for him as a passer throughout his career at Alabama. So I say that jokingly, but I like Kalen DeBoer. I like what he's doing with Jalen Milroe. Now it seems like Alabama is finding a rhythm offensively and defensively. I think defensively, they're probably not getting enough talk for the progression that they've made on that side of the football. Womack just took a ton of flack there in the Georgia game where they just kind of fell apart. And really that second half of that game for the next, 2.5 games, they really struggled defensively. And it seems like they've gotten that back on track. The defensive line at least is playing much better. They're getting turnovers on the back end of the defense. What are they going to do if they don't get the turnovers, though, is my question. You can kind of drive on Alabama, and then all of a sudden you get in the red zone and they take the ball away. That they kind of flip the field in that sense. So what happens when they face a team in the SEC championship game that doesn't turn the ball over? We'll see. Texas at 4. I don't think Texas is the number 4 team in the country. I think you could easily put Texas behind Ole Miss, maybe even behind Penn State. They're really similar to Penn State. They benefit from a very easy schedule. They don't have a great win. Michigan's not a great win. Vandy, you beat them by 3 points, right? Florida laid down and completely just let you do whatever you wanted in that game because they were looking ahead to LSU since they didn't have their quarterback. And Arkansas was in that game pretty much the entire game. So
yeah, if Taylor Green had not gotten injured against Tennessee, that knee, I wonder if that game isn't a little bit different. I mean, I just have to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it shoulda, coulda, woulda. Hindsight's 2020. Blah blah blah. Taylor Green wasn't able to run the football effectively this weekend, and without that scheme at Arkansas, without the quarterback being able to run successfully, it's really kind of moot. It really is. They are quarterback run centric in that system, and I think he took off a total of 16 times and got like almost no yards. Seriously,
yeah.
and obviously a few of those were sacks as well. So he was sacked multiple times. Yeah, that was a poor performance from the Arkansas offense, but I'm trying to give the credit to Texas's defense. I thought they played really well, but not what we're used to seeing out of Arkansas because they didn't really turn the ball over a whole lot, and that was kind of the whole thing with them.
Yeah, and what's really surprising with Texas, we kind of gave them. We had a lot of questions this season with Texas's defense. As good as they were last year against the run, we were saying, all right, you lose Murphy, you lose Sweat. What are you going to do against the run? They've been decent. But then on the back end of the defense, where we also said that they were vulnerable last year, the transfer portal pieces that they got have been phenomenal. I think that Texas and their defense, as good as they are, they're led by the back end. And I do think that Texas has one of the best defenses in the country because of that. I don't have much to say about Texas's defense. The offense is where you have a bunch of questions. Let's see what they do. They've got Kentucky this week. Kentucky's not playing anymore. They quit playing a while ago. I think they'll handle them pretty well. And then you got Texas A&M at Kyle Field. I think as of right now, I'm telling you that Texas A&M is going to win that game. We'll see in a couple of weeks whenever that game gets played and whenever we do our preview exactly how I'm feeling. But right now, I'm leaning A&M in that football game. I'd be crazy not to, in my opinion. Indiana, Ohio State. Let's see what they can do against each other. Get one of these two teams out of the top 3 after this week. I'd like to see it be Ohio State. I guess they would have 2 losses at that point with no great wins up against all these SEC teams that have 2 losses. How does the committee value that if they are going to lose to Indiana? I don't think it's going to happen. Indiana has been a great story. I hope it happens as like just an outsider looking at this football game and knowing the story behind Cignetti and Indiana, having a brand new coach. This is his first year. They're playing outstanding football, even though they haven't really had any tough games. But I'm starting to see a little bit of regression. Really, since the Nebraska game, I've seen them slide just a hair. Curtis Rourke, obviously was hurt, but even since he's come back, they haven't really been quite as dominant, which is tough to uphold. I certainly understand that. I mean, they literally didn't trail in a game for like 10 weeks, so it was pretty impressive what they were doing. But I don't think that they're going to win this football game, but we'll have to dig into it more, and maybe we can come to a different conclusion on Tuesday night for that show, for our preview show, and then Oregon's number one. Nobody's really denying that. I thought that they struggled this week, but it was their 8th week in a row playing, traveled across country, and it was certainly a trap type of scenario. I don't think that Wisconsin's the team that can come up and get Oregon in a trap type of game. That they don't have the talent for that. So, but yeah, Oregon's number one team. Nobody's going to question that.